My dad always called me a lazy parasite. He said I'd sleep through my own funeral if the coffin was comfy enough. I'd fall asleep in class, during dinner, or even while crossing the street. My teacher suggested a hospital visit, but Dad just scoffed. She's just staying up late scrolling on her phone. He'd bark. After that, he took my phone away and ripped the lock off my bedroom door. Every time I looked sleepy, I got a slap across the face. I didn't want to get hit, and I didn't want to make him angry. I started stabbing my thighs with a compass, pulling out my hair, and dabbing peppermint oil in my eyes. But when that wave of exhaustion hit, nothing could stop it. On the day of the final exams, Dad was the proctor for my room. I bit my lip until it bled, begging myself to hold on. Just this once, just stay awake. But the darkness was too heavy. I was so scared. Suddenly my desk was flipped over. I crashed to the floor, chair and all. My temples slammed against the sharp edge of a desk, and everything went black. Dad stood over me, his face twisted with disappointment. Tessa Varick, do you care so little about your future that you'd sleep through a final? If you're this lazy, then just stay on the floor and sleep forever. I lay there on my exam paper, my vision fading to gray. Dad, I think this time, I'm really going to be asleep for a long time. Tessa Varick, how long are you going to keep playing dead? Dad's voice echoed through the silent classroom like a whip. The click of his leather shoes got louder as he walked toward me. My face was pressed against the cold concrete. Where my head had hit the desk, something warm was oozing out. Mr. Varick, I think Tessa really fainted. A boy nearby whispered. She's just being lazy. Dad grabbed my collar and yanked me up. He was incredibly strong, and he hauled me off the floor with one hand. My head dangled uselessly, and my hand scraped against the floor, leaving a streak of skin behind. You sleep in class? You sleep at dinner? And now you're doing this during finals. Dad hissed the words through gritted teeth. You might not have any shame, but I'm the dean of students. I have a reputation to keep. He began dragging me toward the exit. The tips of my shoes left 2 long trails in the dust on the floor. Mr. Varick, maybe we should take her to the nurse? Miss Sterling, a young teacher, stood up with a worried look. Don't bother Miss Sterling. Don't let her fool you. Dad didn't even look back as he sneered. She was probably up until 3 a.m. on some secret device. This is all an act. But her face is so pale. Something looks wrong. Ms. Sterling hurried down from the podium, trying to block his path. She's faking. I know my own daughter better than anyone. Dad slammed the classroom door open. Focus on your exams. If I see anyone else looking around, your papers are void. The room went deathly silent. Dad dragged me all the way to a storage room at the end of the hall. It was filled with broken desks and smelled like old dust. He threw me onto the floor without a second thought. My head hit the wooden door with a dull thud. In that moment, I felt light. I floated up toward the ceiling, looking down at myself. The girl named Tessa was crumpled on the floor, eyes shut, her face white as a sheet. Dad knelt down and grabbed my chin roughly. Tessa, open your eyes. Disgusting. You're just like your useless mother, always using these pathetic tricks. He crumpled the bloody tissue and threw it at my face. Fine, stay here then. Let's see how long you can keep this up. He stood up, wiped the dust off his hands, and walked out. My soul hovered near the ceiling, screaming at him to stop. Dad. That isn't ink. That's my blood. Dad. My head hurts so much. Please help me. But he couldn't hear me. He only gave me the back of his head as he walked away. I heard hurried footsteps in the hallway. It was Miss Sterling. She was holding a stack of scratch paper, using it as an excuse to get close to the room. She peered through the small glass window in the door, her brow furrowed. Tessa, can you hear me? She tapped gently on the wood. The version of me on the floor remained motionless. A fresh drop of blood slid from my earlobe onto my white collar. Miss Sterling's face went pale, and she reached for the handle. Ms. Sterling, what are you doing? Dad's cold voice boomed from the other end of the hall. She jumped, pulling her hand back instantly. Mr. Varick, I just don't think Tessa looks okay. She's fine. Dad marched over and pushed her aside. Leave her alone. The only way to cure her laziness is to let her go hungry for a while. He pulled a heavy ring of keys from his belt and found the brass one. But it's freezing today, and there's no heater in there, Miss Sterling pleaded. The lock clicked into place. Once she gets cold enough, she'll find the energy to wake up and finish her work. The bell for the end of the exam rang. The hallway instantly erupted with noise as students compared answers. My soul drifted outside the storage room, watching Dad stand near the office. My younger brother Tyler walked up and handed him a hot coffee. You look tired, Dad. Have something warm. Tyler flashed a bright, perfect smile. Dad took the cup, the frost on his face melting away. At least you're responsible, Tyler. Did you finish that last math problem? I did. I checked it twice. I'm pretty sure I got full marks. Tyler leaned against Dad's arm, acting like the perfect son. Good. Not like that failure inside, playing dead the second the clock started. Dad took a sip of coffee, glaring toward the storage room. Tyler followed his gaze, a flicker of triumph dancing in his eyes. Don't be too mad at her, Dad, Tyler said, his voice dripping with fake concern. Tessa probably just didn't sleep well. I've caught her reading on her phone under the cover so many times. That lie hit Dad right where it hurt. His face darkened instantly. I knew it. Those dark circles under her eyes weren't from studying. He slammed his coffee cup onto a nearby desk. I took her door lock off, and she's still finding ways to sneak around? Unbelievable. Standing beside them, my soul felt a wave of bitterness. I remembered the night he took my lock. He'd been passed over for a promotion, and came home looking for a target. He kicked my door open and saw me nodding off over my homework. Without a word, he grabbed his toolbox and unscrewed the lock while I watched, crying. You don't get privacy in this house anymore, he'd snarled. Let's see you try to be lazy with the door wide open. I hadn't cried that night. I just stared at the inside of my thighs. They were covered in tiny red dots from my compass. Some had scabbed over, others were weeping. To hide the faint smell of blood, I'd started dousing myself in peppermint oil. But when Dad smelled it, he decided I was vaping to hide the scent of something else. Trying to act like a little thug. Are we? He'd slapped me so hard my ear rang, then took my phone. After that, I didn't even have an alarm to wake myself up. I just had to stab deeper. Even now in death, I didn't hate him. I knew he was stressed. I knew raising 2 kids alone was hard. I just wished I could have proven to him that I wasn't being lazy. The intercom announced that the building was closing for the afternoon. The students cleared out, leaving the halls hauntingly quiet. The storage room was a freezer, and the body on the floor was turning stiff. The sun was at its peak, but it couldn't reach through the half-board window. My soul kept track of the time. It had been 3 hours since I fell. The golden window for treating a brain bleed had slammed shut long ago. A flashlight beam cut through the dim hallway. The old security guard was doing his final rounds. The light swept over the storage room window and stopped on the floor. It hit my hand, pale, cold, and clutching a shredded pieces of my exam permit. The guard squinted through the glass. Hello. Is there a student in there? He knocked on the glass and reached for his radio. Front desk? I've got a student down in the 3rd floor storage room. They aren't moving. My soul lunged at the window. Desperate. Please. Open the door. Help me. The radio crackled with static. Then Dad's voice came through, cold and authoritative. The girl in the storage room is on detention. Leave her. The guard hesitated. But Mr. Varick, she's in a really weird position. Maybe I should check on her. I said leave her. No one opens that door today. Dad's voice rose, leaving no room for argument. She needs to reflect on her behavior. A little hunger won't kill her. The guard sighed and clicked off his light. Whatever you say, boss. The diner across from the school was bustling. Since it was the end of finals, Dad had treated Tyler to a nice meal. The table was covered in Tyler's favorites, ribs, fried shrimp, and loaded fries. There was nothing there that I liked. Here, Tyler, eat up. You need to refuel after that brain workout. Dad peeled a shrimp and placed it on Tyler's plate. Thanks, Dad. Tyler smiled and pushed a rib toward Dad. You should eat too. You worked hard proctoring today. As long as you get that top spot, it's all worth it. Dad looked at Tyler with nothing but pride. When the results come out, if you're number 1 in the grade, I'll give you whatever you want. Tyler tapped his chin thoughtfully. I want to go to Disney World. Everyone else has already been. Done. We'll go next week, Dad promised, his face breaking into a rare grin. My soul stood in the corner of the booth, watching them. The cold seemed to seep into my spirit. I remembered the note in my pocket, a contract I'd written for myself. I'd promised to get into the top 50 if Dad would just give me my door lock back. That paper was now soaked in my blood, the ink smeared beyond recognition. I'd never get to show it to him. After lunch, Dad headed back to school to grade the papers. The teachers were all gathered in the lounge, the air filled with the scratching of red pens. Dad was grading the English lit exams. He was moving fast until he hit a completely blank sheet. The name at the top was written in shaky, barely legible letters, Tessa Varick. I'd used every ounce of my strength to write my name before I collapsed. Dad stared at the blank page, a muscle in his jaw twitching. Not just lazy but defiant now, he muttered. He gripped his red pen so hard I thought it would snap. Everything okay, Arthur? You look like you're about to explode. The department head leaned over to look. Wow, not a single word on the essay? That's a bold way to fail. It's just my ungrateful daughter, Dad spat. He grabbed the red pen and drew a massive X across the entire page. The ink bled through to the back of the paper. She's gone too far this time. Napping in class is one thing, but this is an insult. He shoved his chair back, the legs screeching against the tile. I'm going to settle this once and for all. He grabbed the failing paper and stormed out of the lounge. The wind in the hallway whipped his coat, matching the fire in his eyes. It was 4 p.m. The sun was starting to dip. The hallway outside the storage room was draped in shadows. Dad didn't bother with the key at first. He kicked the door hard. Tessa, the sun is going down. Are you done with your little nap yet? Silence. He scoffed, jammed the key into the lock and threw the door open. The smell of mildew and stagnant air rushed out. Dad marched in, holding the red-marked paper like a weapon. Get up and look at this pathetic excuse for an exam. Then he stopped mid-sentence. I was still in the exact same spot, in the exact same position as 4 hours ago. Are you really still playing this game? The afternoon light hit the room at a sharp angle. Dust motes danced in the air above my body. I was curled up in a way that looked painful and unnatural. My fingers were locked in a death grip around my permit. My fingernails had turned a sickly purple, digging into my palms. The pool of blood on the floor had dried into a dark, crusty rust color. Dad walked over and nudged my stiff leg with his shoe. What is this? Some kind of performance art? He rolled the exam paper into a tube and whacked my shoulder with it. You think putting some red dye on the floor is going to stop me from making you rewrite this 100 times? No answer. I didn't flinch. I didn't breathe. Tessa, my patience is gone. His voice was a low roar of suppressed rage. Get up. Right now. Go to my office and finish this test. He reached down to grab my arm. The second his skin touched mine, he froze. My skin wasn't just cold. It was like ice. My limb was rigid. Why? Why are you so cold? He yanked his hand back, a flash of panic crossing his face. But his stubbornness quickly took back control. Of course you're cold. You've been lying on a concrete floor in the winter. He stood up straight, his lip curling. This pity play won't work. Even if you freeze to death, you're finishing that work. Miss Sterling happened to be walking by the room. She peeked inside, her eyes widening. The paper she was carrying slipped from her hands, scattering like snow. A piercing scream ripped through the hallway. She covered her mouth, pointing at the dark stain on the floor. Blood. Mr. Varick, there's so much blood. Stop overreacting. It's just some ink she brought to fake an injury. Dad frowned, his eyes hard. Kids these days will do anything to get out of a test. That's not ink. That's blood. I know the difference. Miss Sterling was shaking, backing away into the hall. I am calling the nurse. I'm calling Dr. Miller. Dr. Miller arrived a minute later, running so fast his lab coat was flying. He burst into the room and dropped to his knees beside me. He searched for a pulse in my. Seconds ticked by. Dr. Miller's hands began to tremble uncontrollably. He peeled back my eyelid and shone a light into my eye. Dr. Miller, don't help her with this act, Dad said, crossing his arms. She's probably holding her breath. She's fine. Dr. Miller looked up, his eyes bloodshot and full of horror. He slapped Dad's hand away when he tried to nudge me again. Mr. Varick, an act? Are you out of your mind? His voice cracked, echoing in the empty room. Her pupils are fixed and dilated. Her body is already in rigor. You locked a child with a massive brain hemorrhage in a closet for 4 hours. The failing exam paper slipped from Dad's fingers and hit the floor. The room went completely silent. Even the wind outside seemed to stop. Dad stared at Dr. Miller as if he had spoken another language. What? Dr. Miller's face twisted with fury. She's dead. The words landed like a hammer. She's been dead for hours. Dad took a stumbling step backward. No. His voice came out weak. No, that's impossible. Dr. Miller pointed at the dried blood beneath my head. She suffered a severe head injury. She needed emergency treatment immediately. Instead, she was left here. His eyes burned into Dad's. Left here to die. Dad shook his head violently. She was sleeping. Sleeping. Dr. Miller nearly shouted. A sleeping child doesn't have fixed pupils. A sleeping child doesn't go into rigor mortis. Miss Sterling was crying openly now. I told you something was wrong. Her voice trembled. I told you. Dad looked around the room frantically, as if searching for someone to agree with him. Someone to tell him this was all a misunderstanding. But nobody did. The security guard had arrived. Several teachers stood frozen in the doorway. Every face staring at him carried the same expression. Horror. For the first time in my life, Dad looked afraid. His eyes slowly drifted toward my body, toward the blood, toward the crushed exam permit still trapped in my fingers. His knees gave out. He collapsed onto the dusty floor. No. The word barely escaped him. No. Dr. Miller carefully removed the permit from my hand. Something folded fell out with it. A bloodstained piece of paper. The contract. The one I'd written. The paper unfolded in his hands. Most of the ink had smeared away, but one sentence remained readable. If I get into the top 50, Dad will give me my door lock back. The hallway fell silent again. Miss Sterling covered her mouth. One teacher began crying. Dad stared at the note. His face turned white. No. His hands started shaking uncontrollably. No, Tessa. Memories crashed into him all at once. Me studying under the kitchen light. Me falling asleep over textbooks. Me dragging myself out of bed before sunrise. Me showing him practice tests. Me asking him if he could quiz me. Every time he'd ignored it. Every time he'd called me lazy. Every single time. And suddenly, a realization struck him. He had never actually seen me wasting time. Never. Only sleeping. Always sleeping. Too much. Far too much. Dr. Miller's expression darkened. Did she have a medical condition? Dad looked up blankly. What? Did she ever see a neurologist? No. A sleep specialist? No. Any doctor? Dad's lips trembled. No. The room erupted. You never took her to a doctor? She was falling asleep everywhere. Even teachers reported it. The security guard looked disgusted. My God. Miss Sterling wiped away tears. Last year she fell asleep standing up during a fire drill. Another teacher spoke. She collapsed in the library twice. And she fell asleep during lunch. And during assembly. Each sentence hit Dad like a punch. He remembered every report, every concern, every suggestion, and every excuse he'd made. She's lazy. She's making it up. She's looking for attention. Dr. Miller slowly stood. I can't confirm without an autopsy. His voice was heavy, but from what everyone is describing. He looked down at me. I strongly suspect she suffered from severe narcolepsy. Dad froze. The word seemed unfamiliar. Narcolepsy. A neurological disorder. A real illness. Not laziness. Not rebellion. Not disrespect. An illness. One that had been destroying my life while the person who should have protected me punished me for it. Dad suddenly lunged forward. No. His voice cracked. No, that's not true. He grabbed my shoulders. Tessa. His tears splashed onto my frozen hands. Tessa, wake up. Nobody moved. Tessa. His voice became desperate. Please. He shook me harder. I believe you now. Nothing happened. I'll give your lock back. Silence. I'll buy you a new phone. Nothing. I'll take you to every doctor in the country. Nothing. His entire body began to shake. Please. The word came out broken. Please wake up. But dead girls don't wake up. My soul stood beside him, looking down. For years I had wanted to hear those words. Just once. Just once. Believe me. Please. That's all I had ever wanted. But now it was too late. Far too late. Outside, sirens wailed as police and paramedics arrived. The school doors opened. Investigators began flooding the building. And as they carried my body past the stunned students gathering outside, whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Tessa died. What happened? Mr. Varick locked her in there. He thought she was faking. He left her alone all day. The whispers became accusations. The accusations became outrage. And for the first time in his life, Arthur Varick found himself standing exactly where he had forced his daughter to stand for years. Judged, condemned, and completely alone. The news spread across the city before sunrise. By morning, every local station was carrying the story. Dean accused after daughter dies following head injury at school. Student reportedly locked in storage room for hours. Multiple staff members claim warnings were ignored. Arthur Varick sat alone in his dark living room as the headlines repeated over and over. Each replay showed the same image. My school photo. My shy smile. My honor roll certificates. The teachers who had spoken up. The security guard who had tried to help. And finally the storage room door. The door he had locked. The school district moved quickly. By noon, Arthur had been suspended. By evening he was terminated. The dean who had spent years obsessing over his reputation lost it in a single day. Parents flooded the district with complaints. Students organized vigils. Former classmates shared stories online. Tessa was always studying. She looked exhausted all the time. She literally fell asleep while standing. She wasn't lazy. One post went viral. It showed a photo from gym class. My shorts had ridden up slightly. Tiny scars covered my thighs. Hundreds of them. Compass marks. The comments exploded. She was hurting herself to stay awake? How much was this child suffering? And nobody helped her? Then came the autopsy report. The findings were devastating. Years of untreated narcolepsy. Severe sleep deprivation. Signs of chronic self-harm meant solely to stay conscious. The medical examiner concluded that even before the fatal injury, my body had been pushed far beyond healthy limits. Every detail made the public angrier. But nobody was prepared for what happened next. Police recovered my confiscated phone. Inside were thousands of notes, alarms, schedules, study plans, messages I'd written but never sent. One note was titled, "Things I Wish Dad Knew." The contents were released during the investigation. People cried reading it. I'm not sleeping because I want to. I try really hard. Sometimes I stab my legs because it helps me stay awake. I know Dad hates lazy people. I wish he knew I hate this too. I wish he would believe me. The city turned on Arthur completely. Neighbors crossed the street when they saw him. Restaurants refused to serve him. Parents who once praised him now publicly condemned him. Every achievement he'd spent decades building collapsed. Then Tyler's lies came out. Investigators discovered messages between him and friends. Messages laughing about me, mocking me, celebrating whenever Dad punished me. One message read, "If she keeps getting blamed, Dad won't pay attention to anything I do." Another, "She'll probably sleep through finals again LOL." The internet was merciless. The perfect son became a public villain overnight. His friends abandoned him. His scholarship offers disappeared. Students who once admired him treated him like a pariah. The house became a prison. Father and son trapped together, neither able to escape what they'd done. Months later, criminal charges were filed. Negligent homicide, child endangerment, obstruction of emergency intervention. The trial drew enormous attention. Witness after witness took the stand. Teachers, students, the nurse, the security guard, Miss Sterling. Each testimony destroyed another piece of Arthur's defense. Then Dr. Miller testified. The courtroom was silent. If Tessa had received prompt medical treatment after the injury, could she have survived? Yes. The answer was immediate, clear, certain. With timely intervention, her chances were extremely high. The entire courtroom seemed to stop breathing. Arthur broke down. For the first time, there was nowhere left to hide. No excuses. No blaming laziness. No blaming phones. No blaming teenagers. Just one terrible truth. His daughter had trusted him, and he had failed her. The judge's sentence was harsh, not because of anger, because of the extraordinary cruelty revealed by the evidence. As officers led Arthur away in handcuffs, he turned toward the gallery, toward the large photograph of me displayed beside the victim impact statements. For a moment he simply stared. Then he began sobbing. Not the controlled tears he'd shown reporters. Not the self-pity he'd displayed during the trial. These were the cries of a man finally understanding the full weight of what he'd done. But understanding changes nothing. The grave remained full. The chair at the dinner table remained empty. The daughter who had spent years begging to be believed was gone forever. And the silence she left behind became the punishment Arthur Varick would carry for the rest of his life.